Somewhere on a road in Normandy sits a Tiger tank, completely intact. No shell hole, no burned-out hull. The armor the Allies could never crack is flawless, and its own crew has walked away and left it. To understand why a nation would abandon the most expensive weapon it owns, undamaged, you have to stop thinking about tanks as weapons, and start thinking about them as bills that never stop arriving. Because that tank did not die in a duel. Nobody beat it. It ran out of the one thing that armor can't replace, on a day when there was no one left to tow it, and the men inside made the only rational decision an owner can make. They set a charge, or they didn't even bother, and they walked. 57 tons of the finest engineering in the world turned into a landmark, and the enemy drove past it in a machine that cost a fraction as much and kept driving. On paper, the Tiger wins every argument. Thicker armor, a gun that kills at distances where the other side is still squinting, a reputation so heavy that Allied crews reported Tigers in sectors that never had a single one. On paper, you would build nothing else. In the field, the paper doesn't fight. In the field, a tank is only a tank on the mornings it starts, on the roads it can reach, with the fuel it can drink, and the crew that survived the last engagement. And the gap between those two worlds, the machine on paper and the machine that actually shows up, is where wars are decided. So here is the promise of the next half hour. Every tank ever built falls into one of three fates. Some win the duel in the war, they are lethal and they are there, again and again. Some quietly bankrupt the nation that owns them, bleeding fuel and skilled labor and rail cars until the balance sheet loses the war the battlefield never did. And some turn on their own crews, stranding them, betraying them at the worst possible moment, becoming the reason good men die a mile from safety. We are going to watch the Tiger drift, slowly and magnificently, from the first fate toward the last. Because out of fuel or short of spares, the best tank in the world is just expensive steel. Now, tank is one word doing the work of three completely different businesses, and if you don't separate them, you will draw the wrong lesson from all of this. The first business is the perfectionist. You build the fewest, finest machines you can. You win by making each one worth 5 of theirs. This is the Tiger, and later the Panther and the King Tiger. The entire bet is per unit superiority. Dominate every encounter, and let the kill ratio do the arithmetic. The cost structure of this business is front-loaded and brutal, enormous investment in each hull, and a logistics tale that scales with complexity. The second business is the standardizer. You don't build the best tank. You build a good enough tank, the same good enough tank, tens of thousands of times, and you win on availability, on how many are running on the morning of the battle. This is the Sherman and the T-34. The cost structure here is the mirror image. Cheaper per unit, radically simpler to feed and fix, and it gets cheaper as you go. The third business is the improviser, the expedient, the stopgap, the tank destroyer welded up from whatever chassis was spare. Fascinating, but not our fight today. Our fight is the first two, head-to-head. The perfectionist versus the standardizer. And the thing almost everyone gets wrong is assuming the perfectionist is the smart, premium choice, and the standardizer is the cheap compromise. By the end, you'll see it's the reverse, that the standardizer was doing the harder, smarter math all along. And notice what cost structure really means here, because it's the hinge of everything. It is not the price of the tank. It's the price of the tank plus every recurring obligation the tank drags behind it for the rest of its life. The fuel it burns, the crew you train, the shells it feeds on, the parts that wear, the specialists who fix it. The perfectionist minimizes the number on the invoice and maximizes everything after it. The standardizer does the opposite. And in a long war, everything after the invoice is where the money actually lives. Let's start where every owner starts, the sticker. A Tiger Eye cost the German war economy somewhere around 250,000 Reichsmarks a copy. Hold that number, because in a moment, it's going to become the smallest number in this entire transaction, and that's the whole point. What does that $250,000 buy? It buys a Maybach engine straining at the edge of its own design, hauling a weight it was never really comfortable with. It buys the 88mm gun, an optic system ground to a standard that borders on jewelry, and a suspension of interleaved road wheels, beautiful, smooth riding, and packed together like a puzzle, so that pulling one wheel from the inner row can mean pulling half of them. Every one of those choices is a masterpiece. Every one of them is also a bill you'll be paying for, as long as the machine exists. And then there's the labor, which is where the numbers get slippery and honest people disagree. Germany's own manual bragged that a single Tiger took 300,000 man-hours, a figure that has been repeated for 80 years and is almost certainly propaganda arithmetic. Dig into the factory records, and the real average looks closer to 50-odd thousand hours per hull, swinging wildly depending on the month. But here's the thing. It doesn't matter which figure you believe. At the low end, a Tiger still swallowed something like twice the labor of the Panther beside it, and many times what the enemy spent on the machine it would meet in battle. Pick any number in the honest range and the conclusion survives intact. That's not a weakness in the argument, that's the argument. The perfectionist is expensive at every figure. And there is one line item that never appears on any tank's price tag, and it may be the most expensive thing you buy: the crew. A Tiger was not a machine you handed to conscripts. It rewarded a commander who could read ground and range, a gunner who could exploit an optic that good, a driver who understood a temperamental drivetrain by feel. That crew took months to make and a single bad afternoon to lose, and when they burned, the skill burned with them. You didn't just lose 5 men in a tank. You lost the hardest to replace component in the entire system, the one no factory produces. The standardizer understood this too, in reverse. Build the tank simple enough that an ordinary crew, trained quickly on a machine identical to 10,000 others, can be effective in it, and can be replaced by the next ordinary crew when the worst happens. One army treated its crews as irreplaceable artisans. The other treated them as trained and replaceable, and therefore survivable as a system. Only one of those philosophies can absorb 3 years of losses. Only 1,400 Tigers were ever completed. Not 14,000, 1,400. Sit with that against what's coming. Here is the one mechanism that governs everything, the paradox at the center of owning a tank. Combat power is measured in minutes. Ownership is measured in the thousands of hours between them. The duel the moment the Tiger was built for lasts across an entire career, maybe a few hours total. The rest of the machine's life is the in-between. The road march, the idling, the waiting, the breaking down, the towing, the repairing, the fueling, the fueling, the fueling. And the Tiger was optimized, gloriously, for the minutes while quietly ignoring the hours. Watch what that does. A Tiger's fuel gives it a road range of not much more than 100 kilometers before it's dry, and cross-country, clawing through mud, closer to 60. A day's operation. And then it needs to drink again. And it drinks in a way that made its own supply officers wince. The T-34, it was hunting, could go 3 to 4 times as far on the same swallow of fuel. Even the humble Sherman went roughly twice as far. So before a single shot is fired, the Tiger has chained itself to a river of fuel trucks. And every one of those trucks needs a road and fuel of its own, and a driver who could have been somewhere else. And fuel is only the first appetite. The gun has one too. That superb 88 fired its own dedicated ammunition, and every round it wanted had to be manufactured, loaded onto a train, driven up the same strangled roads, and carried forward by the same overworked trucks that were already hauling the fuel. Now multiply that across an army that fielded Tigers, and Panthers, and older Panzers, and assault guns, each with its own caliber, its own shell, its own spare parts, a quartermaster's nightmare of incompatible supply lines, all competing for the same finite road. The other side made a colder, wiser choice. Standardize the gun, standardize the shell, so that the round in this tank fits that tank, and one supply stream feeds the whole fleet. It's less glamorous than a bigger gun. It is worth more than one. This is the trap of the perfectionist, and it never closes. Lethality scales, in a straight line, one tank, one gun, one target at a time. But the logistics tail scales like a curse, faster and faster. The more you demand of the machine, out of fuel or short of spares, the best tank in the world is just expensive steel. And the Tiger was always thirsty. Now, if you're the one signing the orders, there's an obvious rebuttal sitting right there, and it feels like wisdom. Quality over quantity. Build fewer, build better. One Tiger kills 5 Shermans, so surely one Tiger is the bargain and 5 Shermans are the waste. That logic is a beautiful trap, and it's cheap for exactly the reason it looks smart. Because the moment you commit to the fewer better machine, you don't save money, you move it. You move it into recovery, because when your rare, precious tank breaks down, you cannot simply abandon it the way an army with 50,000 tanks shrugs off one. You move it into rail, and transport, and specialists, and a spare parts pipeline for components no one else on Earth builds. The Tiger was so wide it wouldn't even fit the rail network as is. To load it onto a train, the only practical way to move it any distance without shaking it to pieces, the crew had to jack it up, strip off the outer road wheels, and fit a whole second, narrower set of transport tracks, then reverse the entire operation at the far end. Moving it wasn't logistics. It was a construction project you performed every single time. And the rail problem wasn't a one-time inconvenience, it set the tempo of the entire war effort. Tanks don't drive to the front. Over any real distance, they'd destroy themselves trying. They ride the trains. So a tank too wide for the standard rail car is a tank that fights the timetable before it ever fights the enemy, slower to move, harder to concentrate, dependent on a ritual of jacking and retracking at both ends of every journey. The ordinary tank just rolled onto the flat car and rode. One design respected the railway it would have to live on. The other demanded the railway bend around it, and the railway, like the fuel supply and the repair depot, could only bend so far. The cheap land was never cheap. The premium tank doesn't cost less to own than 5 ordinary ones. It costs more, the bill just arrives somewhere you weren't looking. And that hidden bill comes in 3 layers, each one heavier than the last. The first layer is the fuel leash. We've already met the tether that shortens with every operation. The reason a Tiger's operational radius on a bad day was less about the enemy than about the nearest full tanker. That's the layer everyone eventually sees. The second layer is recovery, and it's where the trap really tightens. When a 57-ton tank dies in the field, a thrown track, a seized transmission, a bog it sank into, you cannot leave it, and you cannot move it easily. The recommended way to tow a stricken Tiger was to hitch up 2, sometimes 3, of Germany's largest heavy half-tracks, coupled together, and drag it. 3 of your biggest recovery vehicles, tied up, saving 1 tank. And the obvious shortcut, just use another Tiger to tow it, was formally forbidden because the transmission couldn't take the strain and you'd simply convert 1 broken tank into 2. So every breakdown didn't cost you 1 machine. It cost you the machine, plus the small convoy required to rescue it, plus the hours, plus the fuel they all burned doing it. The third layer is the deepest, and the Panther tells it best. When Germany rushed its next wonder tank to the front at Kursk in 1943, the machine didn't wait for the enemy to defeat it, it defeated itself. Final drives shattered, engines caught fire. Within days, roughly half the force was out of action from breakdowns alone, and the operational rate sank to a figure that reads like a typo. 16%. 16! For every 100 of these magnificent machines on the books, 84 were somewhere other than the fight. It clawed its way up to a merely miserable 37% by winter. The tank was so unfinished that early on it couldn't even turn while reversing without risking the drive. And now stack the repair problem on top of the breakdown problem, because this is where the 2 philosophies separate for good. When a Tiger or a Panther broke, fixing it often meant a specialist, a heavy crane, and a bespoke part that fit that machine, and almost nothing else apart, that had to travel the whole length of the strangled supply line to reach a workshop that was already overwhelmed. Compare that to the machine on the other side of the field. A Sherman was engineered to be worked on. Its whole transmission came off through a bolt-on plate on the front of the hull without pulling the turret, and its engine could be swapped out by field mechanics in a couple of hours. Parts were interchangeable across variants, so the piece off one dead tank fit the next living one. One army's repair depot was a bottleneck full of irreplaceable specialists waiting on irreplaceable parts. The others was a fast, forgiving assembly line for putting damaged tanks back in the fight. This is the final layer of the perfectionist's bill. The machine so advanced it spends its life breaking itself, and so intricate that fixing it is slow, specialized, and starved. You pay the repair crews whether the tank fights or not, and they are busiest exactly when you need the tank most. Now let's put the same Tiger battalion through 2 different years, because the machine doesn't change the world around it does, and that gap is the entire product. Year 1, the front is advancing. Everything the Tiger is good at gets to happen. It sits in a hull-down position, picks off enemy armor at ranges they can't answer, and racks up the lopsided kill counts that fill the legend. And crucially, when a Tiger throws a track or a transmission fails, the ground stays yours. The recovery crews roll forward, the half-tracks drag it home, the mechanics pull the engine, and in a week your expensive steel is a weapon again. On a winning front, the Tiger's flaws are survivable, because breakdown is a delay, not a death. This is worth sitting with, because it's the quiet secret of the Tiger's legend. Those staggering kill ratios that fill the documentaries were very often earned in year 1, on the defensive, on ground the Tigers held, in conditions where a breakdown could be recovered and a good gun could pick its moment. The legend is real. It's just measured in the currency the Tiger was good at. Individual engagements on good days. The war was billed in a different currency entirely. Year 2, the front is collapsing. Same tank, same crew, same superb gun. But now every single one of those breakdowns is fatal, not to the enemy, to you. The transmission goes, and there's no recovery convoy coming, because they're all busy, or gone, or on the wrong side of a river. The tank runs dry, and the fuel truck that would have saved it is a burning wreck 20 kilometers back. And so the crew does the arithmetic the men in Normandy did. The tank cannot move, help is not coming, and a working Tiger in enemy hands is a gift you cannot give. So they blow it up, or they walk. Reports from Tiger units in retreat show it plainly, machine after machine lost not to enemy fire but to breakdown, fuel, and the simple absence of a way home. Same tank. The good year, an apex predator. The bad year, a string of expensive steel monuments. The tank was never the variable. The war around it was, and that gap is what you actually bought. And here's the part that should stop the easy explanations cold. This was not a story of incompetence. The men in the Tiger battalions were, by any honest measure, doing everything right. These were often the most experienced crews Germany had, in the most capable tank on the field, frequently winning their engagements, sometimes by staggering margins. The engineers who designed the thing were not fools. They built exactly what they were asked to build, a machine to dominate any tank it met. If this were a story about bad soldiers or bad designers, it would be a comfortable story, and you could tell yourself you'd have done better. You wouldn't have. That's the point. Give the most skilled crew in the world, the finest tank in the world, and a collapsing supply situation still grinds them down, one dry tank and one shattered final drive at a time. They outfought everyone and lost the fleet anyway. Because the force killing them wasn't in front of them, it was the calendar, the fuel gauge, the empty spot on the parts shelf. And here's the honest complication, the part the tidy version leaves out. It's tempting to say the Germans were simply foolish to build the Tiger at all, but that's too easy, and it isn't quite true. On the defensive, in the right hands, on ground they could hold, the Tiger genuinely did what it was designed to do, and it terrified an entire alliance into caution. The design wasn't stupid. It was a rational answer to the question, how do I win a single engagement asked by a country that could no longer afford to be asking that question? The mistake wasn't the engineering. The mistake was strategic, pouring finite genius into perfecting the duel while losing the war of supply that decides who gets to duel at all. That's a subtler failure than incompetence, and a far more instructive one because it's the failure of optimizing brilliantly for the wrong measurement. When even excellence executed perfectly still loses, you are no longer looking at a mistake in the doing. You are looking at a mistake in what was measured, a structure built into the machine the day someone chose to optimize the minutes and ignore the hours. So if the perfectionist tank is such a punishing thing to own, thirsty, fragile, immobile, irreplaceable, here's the question that flips the whole board. Why did the side that lost the tank duels win the war? And why, knowing everything the Germans knew, would you ever choose to build the ordinary tank instead of the brilliant one? Because you've been watching the wrong number this entire time. Everyone counts tanks built. The real machine underneath the metric that actually decides an armored war is tanks operational at the front on the morning of the battle. And on that number, the whole hierarchy inverts. Do the arithmetic that actually matters. Tiger units, even in good stretches, often reported only 60 to 70% of their tanks ready to roll, the rest in the shop, on the tow hook, or waiting on a part. So take that 1,400, the total ever built, and remember, they were never all present at once. Strip out the ones lost, and the ones broken, and the ones stranded a fuel tank away. And on any given morning, the number of Tigers actually able to fight in the whole German army was painfully small. Now look across the line. Even at an ordinary readiness rate, an army with 50,000 Shermans has more running tanks in a single sector than Germany had Tigers on the entire Western Front. You did not need your tank to be 5 times better if the enemy could put 10 times as many in the field and keep 8 of them running. The duel was never the contest. The morning roll call was: Germany finished 1,400 Tigers. America built more than 49,000 Shermans. The Soviet Union poured out 57,000 T-34s. And here's the detail that should end the argument. As the war got harder, the T-34 got cheaper, its price deliberately driven down from around 270,000 rubles to 135,000. Its part count slashed, its build time halved. They engineered the machine to be more replaceable, not more perfect, on purpose. A Sherman's engine could be swapped in a couple of hours. Its transmission came off through a bolt-on plate on the nose. Break it Monday, fight it Wednesday. These weren't compromises that happened to work out. They were the correct answer to the real question. And the Germans were answering a different question with genuine brilliance. That's the flip. The Tiger optimized the duel. The Sherman and the T-34 optimized the war. And out of fuel or short of spares, the best tank in the world is just expensive steel, which means the tank that wins isn't the one that runs best on its best day. It's the one you can always keep running and cheaply replace on the day you can't. Which brings us to the last and most uncomfortable question any wartime owner faces. Not how good is my tank, but how fast can I replace the one I just lost? Because in a war of attrition, that is the only question that compounds. Think of it as the exit problem. When a Sherman burned, its crew was, brutally, fungible, trained on a standardized machine. They could climb into another identical Sherman, rolling off a pipeline that never stopped, and be back in the line in days. When a T-34 died, the factory had already built its replacement, and 3 more behind it. The loss was real, but it was liquid. It converted back into fighting power almost immediately, because everything was interchangeable and everything was abundant. When a Tiger died, there was no liquidity. There were only ever 1,400 of them. Each one carried tens of thousands of hours of irreplaceable skilled labor the Reich could not spare. And the replacement, if it came at all, came slowly and at ruinous cost. Every Tiger lost was a permanent subtraction. Every Sherman loss was a temporary one. And the same brutal math ran through the crews, which is where it cuts deepest. Replace the standardizer's tank, and the standardizer's crew steps out of a burning hull and into an identical machine they already know by heart. Replace the perfectionist's tank, and you still have to replace the months of training that died with the last one, the commander's eye, the gunner's touch, none of it interchangeable, none of it fast. So the perfectionist bleeds twice on every loss, once in steel that takes an age to rebuild, and once in skill that can't be rebuilt at all. Run that difference across 3 years of grinding attrition, and it doesn't add, it multiplies. The standardizer isn't just replacing tanks faster. It's fighting a fundamentally different kind of war, one where losses heal and the enemy's losses don't. You don't need to win every duel if you can always afford the next tank and the next crew, and he never can. So let's hold both truths at once, the way honest history demands. The Tiger was a magnificent machine. The awe is real. The engineering was genuinely ahead of its time. The crews were brave and skilled and often victorious. None of that was ever the illusion. The illusion was the idea that any of it was the thing that wins. The Germans built the better tank and asked it to win a war. It was structurally unequipped to win, because they were counting the wrong number, measuring the sword, when the war was decided by the whetstone, the wagon, and the spare. And that's the lesson that outlives the tank, and the war, and the century. In any contest of attrition armies, factories, businesses, empires, the prize almost never goes to the most perfect instrument. It goes to the one that can be fed, fixed, and replaced faster than it can be destroyed. The Tiger won its battles and lost its war, because the best tank was never the strongest one on the road. It was the one that could still get back up.